Welcome to the iHemp Hour. We are back after a long hiatus as the hemp industry is starting to bubble to the surface again for all the wrong reasons. My name's Dave Crable. I'm with the iHemp Michigan. It's our mission to educate, inform, and promote the research, development, and cultivation of industrial hemp. And I'm joined today with the stellar cast of guests that we'll introduce in a second. And we also have Mike Brennan from the 420 Post. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Dave. I'm looking forward to getting this started again. What has it been about a year or so since we stopped this?
It's been a little bit. So Blaine Bechtold, back in the saddle here. Blaine, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and your guests.
All right. Well, my name is Blaine Bechtold. I'm one of the founding members of iHemp Michigan along with Dave. And we've been championing the cause since 2018, and now we've got some other things we're going to talk about later in the show, what's happened just recently in Washington regarding the banning of some CBD products. But it's going to be another show for another time. But we'll talk a little bit about that more in the end. So, but we're really excited to get the iHemp Hour back up and running. And we've got a great show today. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that is going to become more prevalent in the future, even though it always is now in everybody's mind that is involved with it. It's called PFAS, what we're going to be talking about. PFAS is all over the place. It's all over the world now. It's not only just a local concern, it's also going to be a national, and it is a national concern as well, and worldwide concern. PFAS, so you guys are going to help me with the enunciations on this because I'm really hard. Polyfluoroalkyl substances. So Leslie, you help me out. I know I butchered that bad, didn't I?
Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances.
See, I really butchered that bad.
Say that fast 3 times, right? So,
are a large man-made group of thousands of chemicals, often called forever chemicals, because they do not break down in the environment or the human body. Leslie, we've had on the show before. Leslie's a professor from Northern Michigan University. Her research focused on the phytoremediation, which is using plants to clear up the environment when it became legal for us in the university to do research with the hemp. She decided to investigate the use of hemp for cleanup PFAS, a class of contaminants that is coming under scrutiny by EPA. PFAS refers to a large class of compounds, but she's limited her study to 2 specific compounds in the class, PFBA and PFOS, and she'll describe those are later. We also have Jason Grostic with us. Jason is one of the farms that has been affected very adversely from the finding out about the PFAS on his farm, and we're going to let him tell his story a little bit. And then Ryan from Myotech is also joining us. And I'll let Ryan kind of give his background on what he does. And then Cody Lay, who is Hemp for Humanity. There was a research project that went on, and Cody and Ryan and Leslie were all part of that. And it was on Jason's farm that it all happened. So that's how that all kind of ties together. So Ryan, I'm going to let you give a little introduction for you.
do you have video? Do you have video, Ryan?
I do, and I have to apologize. I just had to attend to a legal matter that demanded my attention, so I apologize to everyone.
That's fine.
And I'm walking in the snow at the moment.
We'll let it out. So you're ready. We'll edit that out. We'll just let you give your.
Remember, we're just recording, so we can cut that part out. So
awesome. And so my background, correct?
Oh, we lost you.
Hey, what, Ryan? What are you wait? Are you gonna if you're gonna get into a place where you're gonna be sitting down or whatever? We'll come back to you. All right. We'll do that. Oh, good.
Okay.
All right. And then Cody Lay is the president of Hemp for Humanity, doing a lot of great projects with hemp-related building material, hempcrete, hemp insulation. And Cody's joining us too because Cody was part of that study. So with all of that, let me give you just a little bit more background. I'm sorry for my voice today. I'm going to take a little water. All right. So as we talked about this is important because PFAS is considered a forever chemical. It's because they do not break down in the environment or the human body. Michigan currently has over 300 confirmed sites contaminated with PFAS, the forever chemical, affecting groundwater, fish, and communities across the state. Lawsuits, remediation projects, and regulatory debates are ongoing as Michigan grapples with the widespread impact of the toxic substances. But this is also known as a global crisis as well. With unsafe levels of forever chemicals found in drinking water, soil, wildlife, even human bloodstreams across continents, research studies have shown several health risks, including increased infant mortality. Government worldwide are scrambling to regulate and remediate their persistent pollutants. United States, at least 1 in 7 Americans, that equals 49.5 million people, are exposed to unsafe PFAS levels in drinking water. Hundreds of municipality systems have failed to meet the new EPA standards. Europe, the EU has advanced a universal PFAS restriction under REACH, which commits reviewing impacts of electronics, semiconductors, and manufacturing. Asia, evidence persists that Dioxin's 225 conference in Turkey showed municipal waste incinerations are major PFAS emitters, with contaminants spreading across ecosystems. Worldwide, PFAS are detected in wildlife, wildfire smoke, household dust, and food chains, making exposures nearly unavoidable. That leads us to today's accommodated discussion. So, Jason, maybe why don't we start with you? Maybe give a little background on why this has happened to you and what's going on your farm.
All right. Well, thanks for letting me be here. So we got contaminated with our PFAS through biosolids or sludge. All depends on who you are, is what you want to call it. We've always called it sludge, and politically they want to call it biosolids, but it's sludge because it's contaminated and it's gross now. We were taking biosolids sludge as a alternative fertilizer for growing our crops because it's a great, as we call it, a starter fertilizer. So it eliminated us from having to buy starter fertilizer and put on the soil. And the guys that applied it also worked up the soil. So we got to skip one tillage pass across the field also. So realistically, it was kind of a win-win. We got free fertilizer and we got some free tillage out of it. But with that being said, hindsight 2020, it's a complete disaster because X amount of years later, and I'm contaminated with this chemical called PFAS that we'd never heard of. And the state has put first they served me a seizure notice, so we couldn't sell any products. And then 2 years into it, they put a covenant of the land on the title of our property that says our property can no longer be used for agricultural sources of human consumption or animal consumption for the rest of its life. And then on top of it, 6 weeks ago, I applied for a septic permit to put a septic in a building or in front of a building so I could put a bathroom in it and needed to drill a well. We were informed that Eagle is not allowing us to drill wells now on any of our fields that had sludge applied to them. So now we can't even sell our property for real estate because you can't have a well.
So, Jason, how many acres do you have?
I am the primary person of this, as I call it, my shit show, because I was the farmer of it. But the property is owned by my mother owns 200 plus acres. And then the main farm, my brother and I own together. So there's 3 of us involved in it. And between the 3 of us, we have, it's just shy of 400 acres of contaminated land.
And how long has your family been farming there?
We've got over 100 years. We turned 100 in the, I want to say it was like 2016, 2017. We had 100 years on the property. That originally started as a dairy farm. And then in the late 90s, we turned over to raising replacement cattle for other farmers. And then in the early 2000s, we switched over to the beef. And by 2008, 2009, I had gotten my license to sell meat to the public. And we were selling almost all of our beef directly to the public, getting USDA processed, going to farmers market, selling it from the farm, and whatnot. And we raised 90% of our feed ourselves. The only feed that we bought in was some extra protein source and minerals. Everything else was grown and stored by us. And then we also did several hundred acres of row crops to be sold at the grain elevator.
And now the property value is?
Well, when the state of Michigan did the covenant, they told us our property value went from like $6,500 an acre down to $1,000 an acre. Well, now here we are 2 years later and we can't drill wells on it. So zero. Because what are you going to do with land that you can't drill a well on? And you certainly can't build a house on it. So I'm curious of what the state, all of a sudden, their reasoning on this was, because none of our water is contaminated. All of our wells test back negative. The state, when they first came into this thing of however many years it's been now, 6 or 7, this all started, as far as I'm concerned, as a lie on their part, because they told me they were coming to do a biosolid study, which sure, the PFAS is in the biosolids, but they already knew the PFAS is in my soil. And I allowed them to drill 6 test wells. And all of those test wells are negative. All the neighbors' property is negative. All of our wells are negative. But now all of a sudden we're not allowed to drill wells.
And this sludge that you purchased, or well, you received, that was from the township?
The sludge that we received, because yes, that's the other downfall, is everybody says we purchased it and we didn't. For the most part, any sludge around any of our areas is given to you. It came out of the Wixom wastewater treatment plant, which is like 15, 18 miles east of us.
And that's run by the municipality, though, right?
Yes, by a municipality.
And they didn't tell you at the time that, of course, they probably didn't know, but they were taking inputs. I know you don't want to name the source of the input. You'd mentioned that before, but they were taking inputs that were they aware that they have these inputs?
They'll tell you they weren't aware to your face, but the company that was dumping it down the drain had to have a permit to dump it down the drain. And those permits all go through Eagle. So Eagle knew they were dumping it down the drain. I know when my lawyer talked to the municipality, they admitted that they knew for a while that it was being dumped down the drain, but because they had permits for it, it wasn't a concern to them.
Wow.
So legally, what do you plan to do or are doing?
Nothing anymore. We actually filed a lawsuit against the company that dumped it down the drain. We settled out of court, and 15 months into the settlement, they filed bankruptcy. And basically what we received out of them covered the lawyer fees, and we got $100,000.
For your livelihood.
And no livelihood, and now we have no property that's got a value to sell because we can't drill wells on it. You can't do crops on it, and we can't do much anything with it. And I was kind of hopeful in the beginning to find a research company that was going to pay me some decent money for research, but nobody wants to pay you money for research, so that fell through. But on the same token, with that being said, I've teamed up with great research through Ryan that has proven to be pretty impressive at potentially remediating the soil. And if we can get this flowing, maybe there will be a livelihood again here someday.
Yeah. Well, it's a really good goal and works that you're working with, Leslie and Ryan and, the team to do this. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. Let's move on, Ryan. Why don't you give your background and maybe talk a little bit about the research that you and Cody and others did this past summer on Jason's farm?
Sure, absolutely. And yeah, just want to say how grateful I am to be a part of the conversation, and I guess maybe preface with like, not all hope is lost. And my background, briefly, I'm originally from Flint. Uh, family all worked on the lines and automotive and in some aspects for the most part. And then I went to school down in Tampa, Florida, and got into farming. I mean, I baled hay on my father's small horse farm every summer. We'd go visit in Flint, and I loved Michigan summers and despised Florida summers. But I worked on farms, small scale kind of CSA, biodynamic organic farms, and been working with farmers for 15 years now, maybe a little more. And I've just seen the gamut of farms, and I just have such a passion for food. And I, in knowing how pervasive the problems are of polluted soils, I think I've always had a curiosity as to how to rebuild soils. And regenerative agriculture, maybe biodynamic before, and now kind of coined regenerative, and people like John Kemp and others that have pushed this narrative forward and have demonstrated this capability to rebuild soils for nutrient density has really inspired me to believe that this is possible for remediation. And been messing around with worm teas and compost teas, and just kind of flying on intuition, small scale gardening, trialing it at CSA farms, and just seeing it again and again that plants respond to microbes. And then just understanding where we're at in our scientific knowledge of microbes is so limited. Um, and and so my business partner and I, we started this company. I was uh, in the medical cannabis space for several years after moving back to Michigan and being inspired by hemp and cannabis, and seeing people addicted to opiates and PTSD, and just the power that cannabis can have as a master plant, in general. And I've always been excited about the building materials in space, and just like seeing how hemp can be used for so many things, and just the history of it all is just so inspiring and tragic. And so it's really exciting to be now at the kind of the forefront in this space, and working with people like Cody and Leslie, who have been in the hemp space for many years, and then having an opportunity to work with Jason on such a challenging problem. Um, and I think this is the biggest challenge. Let's talk about the project a little bit, if that's sufficient of my background. It's this is such a complex issue, and it's so political, and it's so litigious, and it is so layered. It is very difficult to move the needle in this game, specifically around PFAS, broadly around pollutants in the soil. And we are all learning in real time. Like literally every week, I see a study that comes out about PFAS. I mean, every day, actually, there's new research emerging every day. Whether it's toxicology, whether it's microbiology, whether it's plants, the mechanisms of PFAS. We as a scientific community generally don't know the mechanisms of these compounds very well. I was just having a conversation yesterday with an analytical lab downstate, and it is terrifying to know the limitations of the technologies, and then also at the same time to know how big this problem is, and like the scope of what is happening. And I think this is just part of a broader narrative, of us as humans becoming aware of just like the kind of mess that we've made. And I we can see, we know who's guilty. We can see specifics on this, but in truth, we're all kind of responsible. And I think the ethic that I'm trying to embrace in these kinds of projects really is like, it's never going to be the government or the corporations that like help us dig out of this. It's always about small groups of people doing the hard work on the ground and having faith in each other and trying because so many people don't try even. And so really it's a blessing that Jason, has invited us onto his property and is willing to go the distance and put in the sweat equity that this kind of stuff requires. And so all that to say, my business partner and I, we started this company in 2022, kind of post-pandemic. I got out of the cannabis game as legalization was taking on, and then around the same time, Northern Michigan University was coming on the scene as a big player in the cannabis space with the medical plant chemistry program. So it was like, wow, this is so exciting that our local university is doing some really interesting things. And so my business partner and I, we saw the writing on the wall for like microbes and fungi specifically, that the scientific community just doesn't really know a lot about how fungi interact in the ecosystem, let alone anywhere else. And so, yeah, we were just like wild foraging mushrooms and selling them, and we were making mushroom bags and selling those. And we found a research paper out of University of Minnesota, a preliminary paper on the breakdown of PFAS using a fungal culture. It was a Ganoderma or reishi species. And so just, cold called the researcher and was like, hey, you want to go in on a National Science Foundation small business grant and see if we can find some fungi that can break down PFAS? And luckily, they agreed, and we found a master's student, a protege of Leslie's, that was able to work with us for the span of that project and putting everything together and kind of building out a little laboratory here at the Innovate Smart Zone in Marquette, who's been very gracious to us for the past few years and letting us set up a small wet lab to play around with PFAS and microbes. And so we, in 2023, we submitted, we got the award in 2024. And that spring, or actually summer, I think we were late to it, we were able to design a simple method to plant some grasses with some different inoculum and try to figure out what data sets to collect off of the biomass in the soil. And then we learned some things. We did some bench trials in our lab and started to use hemp. Legalities around that are gray, but we connected with Leslie and trying to understand some of the lessons that she had gained from PFAS in hemp. And then in 2025, this past year, we decided to do a study on hemp specifically and doing different inoculations to see if, we could expand on our lessons. And if the goal, if we could come up with a recipe for Jason and I think the estimates are around 70 million acres of U.S. farmland, the Environmental Working Group quotes, which is roughly, maybe 30% of American farmland is contaminated with PFAS. So there are tens of thousands of farmers that have this issue that Jason has been one of the few to be punished by. And so the dark truth, right, is that everybody eating American food likely is eating PFAS every day, and there's no regulation on it. Nobody is being regulated. They regulate biosolids sometimes on the state level, and maybe EPA will come out with regulations on that, but FDA has not regulated on it. EPA is only regulating drinking water and surface water, and so this is very difficult, to come up with a solution that meets regulation because there's not a lot of regulation on it. So we have to design something that can help us in just the data, just what are we seeing in what is coming out, and then trying to zoom in on a couple key pieces that we can say like, hey, is this moving forward or is it not? And Leslie, Dr. Leslie's been extremely helpful in helping us to hone down and try to make this simple because, again, it is insanely complex. but yeah, we've gotten some of the data from the season, and we're still kind of visualizing it into a case study that we'll be happy to share with everybody and make more public. And yeah, I can go on, but I'll yield my time if that kind of gives a brief overview.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. It's amazing the work you guys are doing. Let's go to Cody for a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll come to Leslie. Cody, anything you'd like to kind of add to the conversation here? I know you've been real involved with the study on this thing and the research on it. So, don't know if you had any comments you'd like to make on it.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can, Cody. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so yeah, definitely grateful to be a part of this project. And yeah, I got involved, like Ryan said, once he wanted to take those bench trials into the field at Jason's, and he had called me when I was actually down on a build site in Tennessee, and he started telling me about the project and you know, what I could be useful for, and basically just the larger scale hemp cultivation that we had been doing in the past few years and how that could apply to this situation. And I originally got really excited about this project because since 2021 we've been growing industrial fiber hemp, and I knew from that experience that it was a powerful soil builder. Just watching my soil organic matter going up every single year. But I think what I immediately saw as an amazing potential for this project is, as you guys know very well, for the past few years since legalization, especially on the industrial fiber and grain side, we've been trying in many different ways to get these markets financially and economically feasible for farmers to invest in. And we've been trying to find markets, and what Hemp for Humanity focuses on is the building materials and affordable housing and sustainable design and stuff like that. So, pushing for those things to really stimulate the hemp agricultural economy. It's a slower build, takes a lot of infrastructure. But what I think that is really amazing about this project is that right now we're giving a use case for the industrial hemp plant in phytoremediation that doesn't take loads of infrastructure, and then can immediately add value to our Michigan economy through increasing land value, cleaning soil. And what we're working on the back end too is like, okay, what can we do with this material once it's used to clean up soil, whether it's PFAS or any other soil contaminant? How can we then take that material off the farm and turn it into products that aren't also, perpetuating that contamination into either the built environment or whatever products we're using. So that's another exciting part of the project that I'm excited to be a part of. So kind of working on both sides of the supply chain. But yeah, overall, it's been an amazing journey to kind of learn more and more about, the soil ecosystem through Ryan and his work, and then how microbes can work in tandem with plants like hemp to really create cleaner soil and a more sustainable economy. And that's really what it's about. I think this is the foundation of a circular economy is what we're kind of researching here. So yeah, definitely grateful for Jason. It's been fun being on the tractor with them and getting the seeds in the ground and talking, ag on that side of things. And then also talking science with Ryan and getting into that. So super grateful to be a part of the project, and yeah, looking forward to more results.
All right. Thanks, Cody. All right. Well, Professor Putman, let's talk to you a little bit. See what you'd like to add to this whole conversation. I know you've been very instrumental with the research part of behind this, and I don't know if you guys are ready to give any information regarding this year's study that we did, but yeah, we'd like your input, please.
Yeah, this year's study, there's a lot of data to sift through for that. So I don't know if we can say anything about that, but let's see. I've done like an outdoor study where I contaminated the soil with PFAS and to see if the hemp, and I grew hemp to see if it would take it up. So I was not able to find it in like the leaves or seeds or anything, but I did find it in the roots. So that's why it's great to have Jason's plot, because that's a real live plot, and it's kind of difficult to like put PFAS in the soil outside when there's who wants to contaminate more? That's the problem. So I'm glad to have this case study with Jason, so we can try different things. But most of my work other than that has been like in the lab, trying to understand how hemp deals with PFAS, and what I'd like to see is if it can actually break it down more than just take it up. And because there are plenty of studies where plants have uptaken PFAS from the soil. And I've done that too. But so I've done, most recently, I've been working with just the seeds. And I just kind of stumbled on this. I germinated some hemp seeds in a solution containing PFOS and PFOA, which are two specific PFAS, two contaminants, and they're the ones that are known to be the most toxic, which is why I'm working with those, because those are of most concern. And like even the seeds in germination will take up PFAS out of the water. So, it's really kind of interesting. And oddly, like when it has a choice of PFOA and PFOS, it will take up more PFOS than PFOA. So there's just like really bizarre things going on with how the hemp seeds interact with the PFAS that they're exposed to. And in looking for, okay, could hemp possibly break down PFAS? There's an enzyme, and it's been published, this enzyme called peroxidase, which with a co-substrate and hydrogen peroxide is able to break PFAS down into smaller compounds. And really that's what we want to be able to do. People ask, well, are those less toxic or not? It's yes, most of them are, but we don't really know because there's so much research yet to be done to understand the toxicity of the different PFAS compounds. But, when you break it down and it's smaller, then there's more things you can do with it. So it's always advantageous to be able to break it down. So, so just to see if like hemp could possibly break them down, I was able to do some peroxidase assays, which is just a test to see if there's peroxidase there. And the hemp seeds, as they're hanging out in the water, germinating, actually exude peroxidase. And so they, in my opinion, they do have the probability of being able to break down PFAS. And whether that would happen in real time, well, while they're germinating in the soil, I don't know, but there's the capacity there. If they're producing peroxidase, then there's something that could be tapped there. So that's what I've been working on most recently.
Dr. Putman,
Have you worked on?
what's your background and how did you get involved in this PFAS research? Is it something you've always worked on, or is it relatively new?
I'm a biochemist, and I consider myself a plant biochemist because I've mainly worked with plants. I've been working with phytoremediation for many, many years. Back when they coined the term phytoremediation, using plants to clean up the soil. And I've done different plants. I worked with black locust, and I've worked with some grasses, a little blue stem, and I've worked with different contaminants. I worked with TCE, I worked with bisphenol A. But then, when the universities were able to work with hemp, and there's not a lot known about hemp because nobody can study it because it's illegal. I thought, this would be a good opportunity to study hemp and see if hemp could possibly act as phytoremediation. And then about the same time, the PFAS issue was really coming to the forefront and becoming a problem, and that was needing to be dealt with. And so I kind of put those two together. And hemp has had a history of phytoremediation of metals. And so, it wasn't a far cry to think, okay, well, maybe hemp can also, phytoremediate other organic compounds too. So I tried with the PFAS.
Have you experimented with other plants like you talk about? You said you used seed for hemp. How about like corn or soybeans or any other kind of row crop stuff we're doing?
No, I have not, but other people have done studies with a variety of plants, and almost all plants take up the PFAS to some extent. So, and
just as we take up the PFAS, right?
yeah, I mean, it's just that's why it's so
Prolific.
pervasive, because the plants take it up. And
so the goal is to remediate the Grostic farmland. Have we had any results? Has it been 2 years now, the work on the farm?
Yeah, I'll let Ryan talk about that.
Yes, yeah, we've had 2 grow cycles. One with grasses that were in the literature, peer-reviewed literature that were showing like red fescue as example, and then hemp this year. And it's before even like talking about the results, I feel like got to talk about like the life cycle somewhat of PFAS. And because this is a class of compounds that, right, the EPA regulates 10 of them, and they regulate those in water down to 4 parts per trillion in terms of like magnitude. That's a very small amount. I mean, right, Dr. Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, it's like a drop inside of that pool is a part per trillion roughly. And so detection is very difficult and takes truly alien technology of machinery and technicians to be able to figure out how to detect it and measure it. It's not as simple as like a metal that you can just, you can test for it in a very specific, and tried and true method in analytical equipment. It takes very specific equipment to detect this. What we're finding out, right? The EPA regulates 10. These machinery, the machines that are commonly used, liquid chromatography, mass spectroscopy, which is a term for magnets and lasers and noble gases going through a system and measuring the mass of these compounds. Those machines in the EPA's method, they look for, that's called the 1633, that's kind of the gold standard right now, looks for 43 analytes, we'll call them, or compounds, target compounds. And these are, PFAS is a carbon chain, which all life is carbon. And then what makes it interesting is that there's a fluoride attached to it, F negative charge. And it's the most reactive, fluoride is the most reactive compound in chemistry. It'll react with anything that has a positive charge generally. And carbon, the discovery that made this technology so fascinating is that carbon and fluorine are the strongest bond in nature or in chemistry. Nature doesn't really do this bond naturally. It binds with, say, calcium, free-floating fluoride, and this is found in nature. This is mined, and it is as calcium fluoride often, and then is extracted to then break apart the calcium and the fluoride, and they recombine it with carbon, and that's what makes it a fire retardant used in the AFFF foams. This is what makes it heat resistant or oil resistant in Teflon pans. makes it water resistant for spray on Gore-Tex or rainproofing. And originally the patent was for a rust prevention for tanks, as I understood it. And generally how those companies go is you develop something for war material and then you decide to sell it to American consumers. This is
Isn't
the
that in our
story.
toothpaste, fluoride?
It is, and it's put into our water system as well, drinking water, claiming that it helps teeth at higher levels, and I think that is now being challenged as well. Fluoride is naturally in our water. I have my water tested, and fluoride is there in small amounts, and a little bit is okay. You get more, you start to get toxic levels of fluoride itself, and so PFAS is toxic because, as I've learned from Dr. Leslie, is it mimics a fatty acid. You know, things that our brain and liver, utilize quite a bit in other parts of the body. And it attaches to serum albumin, which is like a plasma of sorts in our bodies. And the PFAS sticks to it, and the body misinterprets it as a fatty acid. Biology misinterprets it as fatty acid, potentially. So this is the problem in the health game, is that it's telling our bodies it's a fatty acid or biological systems when in fact it is not, and it damages DNA. And then it accumulates in different parts of our body, to be at the liver, muscle tissue, endocrine system. Not all PFAS are the same. As the compounds get shorter and shorter in chain length, generally they move through the body a little bit faster. The standard, which is like an 8-carbon chain, those are the ones that have been studied the most and have been identified as toxic. And there's some, 7 and shorter chains that have as well. But this is like, yeah, it is. So when we take plant samples, and we run it through the LCMS with Leslie or other laboratories, you get a breakdown of 43 compounds, and then you got to decipher, what's going on. And we take samples of the whole plant, the root, the stem, leaves, and the bud. And then we got to run each of those separately through the machine, which is grueling and intensive to prepare and make sure it's all done, accurately. And what I can say generally, what we are seeing, and actually before I say that, there's, this gets even more complex. We're seeing phytoaccumulation, and maybe we're seeing reductions in PFAS. To make a commercial argument, to give farmers or industrial clients, engineering firms, a stronger argument for a commercial purpose, future liability for insurance, and more confidence that we're seeing actual reductions. There's other analytical data sets that we have to collect, that we've learned this year, that would then strengthen those arguments. And so one of those measurements is called total organic fluorine. And this measures all of the fluoride-based compounds that are present, because there's 43 that the machines test for. There are upwards of thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of combinations of this carbon fluorine bond. So if you test for total organic fluorine in the soil, that gives you a good baseline of the entirety of fluoride. Prozac is a fluoride-based medication. And so if you test for total organic fluorine, you're going to get the Prozac in there as well, identified. You're not going to see Prozac in the 43 analytes. And so this just tells you what's happening right now, that when you take that sample. That's a snapshot of what's happening then. There's a third measurement called total organic precursors, and the precursors are future liability, that they're the Lego pieces that break apart, that aren't detected, that could recombine into PFAS compounds in the future. If you, in a dream ideal situation, we would be taking all 3 of those samples in the soil and in the plants, and maybe even in the air, because a lot of these are aerosolized, and with those three measurements, we could say with a lot more confidence as to what is happening, and especially in a real world site like at Jason's farm. So that's just a little bit of the complexity. We did not take those other measurements, and this is a very cost prohibitive space for testing. PFAS tests are very expensive, and there's a big bottleneck right now in the industry for testing. And a single soil sample that I wanted to send off for, a lab test costs like 50, maybe $100, depending on how detailed I want it to be, right? And a PFAS test is going to cost anywhere commercially from $250, and that's getting a sweet deal, to upwards of $500 per test. So if you want to do triplicates and you're testing soil in multiple parts of the plant, the costs explode. And so this is part of the challenge in collecting meaningful data, because it's so expensive. And so we're very fortunate with Dr. Leslie in the chemistry department at NMU. We've been working with master's students and to help us to run tests at low cost and no accreditation, but we can at least get higher throughput and start to see some patterns. So now in the data, what generally we are seeing in looking at the two compounds that actually the state of Michigan regulates in biosolids now, PFOA and PFOS, as Dr. Leslie identified, are the most toxic or contaminants of concern. They've been studied a lot. And looking at those two compounds in the soil, we have seen, we need to do more bench studies and field studies to ensure this is happening along with the other measurements, but seeing 20 to 40% reduction of those compounds in the soil. And that's from, June to October. And so that is somewhat hopeful. That's like, okay, we've got something that we need to dial in further if we want to get it to a commercial state for insurance, to jump on board with us and to raise money on and, build a business around this. Because that's the goal, right? If we can get Jason's soil down to non-detectable levels or way below regulatory levels where biosolids are at, maybe this is an argument for farmers to help clean up soil. In the plant biomass above ground, we see numbers all over the place. And we're lucky also to have some partners in Belgium that have been looking at hemp and PFAS. And so we have some correlative data that we can also see in some of their field trials. And so we're beginning to see the same patterns over university research to field projects across the world. Generally, what we see happening is the shorter chain compounds are accumulating in the leaves in higher amounts. And this is generally measured in parts per billion. And we're seeing numbers range from like 20 parts per billion upwards to like a couple hundred parts per billion in the leaves. In the bud of the plant, we're seeing, again, similar, maybe between like on the low end, a few parts per billion, upwards of 40 parts per billion in the buds. Now, I think for the industrial hemp markets, I think it's interesting to look at the stem, the hurd and the shiv that has market value, that actually we're seeing not a ton of PFAS. We're seeing very low levels. There's a couple compounds that there's debate whether they're toxic or not that we're seeing in higher amounts, but they're shorter chains. So the PFAS isn't sticking in the pump, it's sticking in the leaves and it's sticking in the bud and the roots, I should say. So what we think might be happening is that the microbes in the plants are creating this slurry of digestive enzymes that are chopping up these compounds into shorter and shorter chains. Some of those chains recombine into bigger ones, some of them stay the same, but ultimately they are being pulled up into the plant in higher quantities. So, this was part of our NSF research. Some of that is going to be published publicly, and we're going to put together this case study that'll outline this. But in truth, we're still a little early to know if we got something really strong. some of those other, organofluorine measurements to really ensure that we're on a trajectory. And ideally that these kinds of studies, this kind of data, we want to be able to get it to a place where we can make recommendations to USDA, to FDA, based on real science and real field projects to say, hey, this is the reality on the ground, and here's where things are moving. Let's shape policy that supports farmers and can help rebuild soil at the same time and clean up farms. And that would be the dream. So on this study specifically, let me kind of set that aside and say, what we've discovered this year, maybe even more importantly, is we have now partners that have been in the bioremediation space a lot longer than us, and they are seeing and doing in-field projects. Right now, there's one in Alpena that's running on an old tannery site. They've seen it now at airports where the firefighter training has happened. Using microbes and a very specific biochar, they're able to get PFAS molecules, many of them, using microbes, biochar, and oxygen, either in the form of electrooxidation or different hydrogen peroxide mixtures, and getting PFAS levels back down to non-detects in a matter of anywhere from 90 to 120 days.
Oh my God.
And so there are companies that we are now partnering with, and they're doing this for industrial sites, not for farmers. I think that we can translate this technology to be able to work at scale at farms that have the equipment, that it's the appropriate technology to be applied at the farm site. So that's the hope in working with Jason, and hopefully we can do another, more comprehensive trial next year, where then we can make a stronger commercial and, just defensible argument that Jason's farm is one example that we're going to have, some success at. I feel more confident than ever that we could put something together with our engineering partners, our university research partners, and we can actually do something to move the needle big time on this problem.
Ryan, if you're growing hemp fiber and we're using the shivs to make hemp lime construction, that shiv is encapsulated in lime stone, basically. So it seems like that would be a permanent sequestration of the PFAS, wouldn't it?
Potentially, yeah. And I think, you look at some of the building materials that are out there currently, Dave, it's like concrete has radioactive material in it. And, there's like acceptable levels that we humans have dealt with, or pink board, like what the hell's in pink and polystyrene, all the VOCs. Yeah. So is it any worse than the material that's out there? Probably not. Drywall from China that has God knows what in it, in terms of heavy metals, aluminum, so forth. So I think that, the encapsulating it is a great pathway. I think that there's option for potentially making biochar and using that in hempcrete or other concrete mixtures to improve the R value. There's some evidence coming out that pyrolyzing the material can actually break apart some of these carbon fluorine bonds and purify the carbon that's coming out, the char. But I think, it's like all options are on the table, and then we've kind of got to hone in areas where the data is leading us to, a solution. And that takes, government support, that investment, brave farmers like Jason to be able to say, let's do it and let's just push it forward. Brilliant minds like Dr. Leslie and others that are involved in this. We got to have everybody at the table. We all have family. We all have PFAS in our blood. Our family has PFAS in their blood. There's no escaping it. The CEOs who created this problem, the companies they all have PFAS in their blood. Mm-hmm. So nobody's escaping it, and we've got to work together to figure out solutions. And I think that's the hope, that we can start to outline, off ramps on this problem, because there's going to be many solutions. There's not going to be one sole solution. There's going to be a myriad of options and different tools that we can deploy, but that's going to take time. And I don't know how much time we have left, because this is, the more we look, the more we're realizing how bad it is.
Speaking of which, let me ask you a quick question. Earlier, you said nationally about 30% of the farmland was infected with this PFAS. Is there any way to guesstimate how many farms in Michigan? I mean, Jason's been singled out, but there's a lot of farms in Michigan. I got to assume a lot of farms like Jason's have been contaminated. Do you have any idea how many that is?
So I know that the state tracks a lot of biosolid application, and so some of that data is out there that the state is aware of. But this is, and I don't want to speak out of turn, Jason. So stop me if I do. But I think there's side conversations that they don't want to test any other farms because it could shut down the food system and people stop buying food. And I think that that's a big fear. We're seeing that in Maine, right? There's been more farmers that have been shut down than Michigan. But it's, I mean, probably think about how many sludge trucks, you might see driving up and down, county roads. Like, they're pretty ubiquitous, and that in the sludge ponds too. If there's been a fire, or animals are on, fluoride based, medications, they accumulate in those sludge pools, and then they're just applied back on the field. So it's probably in the thousands, I would say, Mike. That's probably conservative even.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's probably every farm, every farm that uses sludge, right?
Well, and to make it even more complex, some of these smaller compounds are actually entering, the hydrological cycle and are evaporating and raining back down on us, kind of like nanoplastics. And so there's a lot of noise, we'll say, in the data, in the machinery, that like we're finding out that these compounds, and especially they call them ultra short chains, they're everywhere. And so it's very hard to, get high quality, good data, which is why, looking at some of the bigger compounds specifically can help us to see if we're moving in the right direction. But it's pretty pervasive.
Hey, Jason, you had mentioned something about Maine, that they had different legislation where if you got it down to a certain level, you could start using your land again. Am I memory correct?
Well, excuse me. For the most part, yes. So Maine actually took and their legislation and put together millions of dollars to help farmers out. And they've gone in and actually test each farm as its own little shit show and determine at what rate can, for simple terms, cattle eat PFAS contaminated feed. And if they eat that contaminated feed that's got X amount of parts per billion in it, and they eat that for 160 days, if they put them on clean feed for 90 days, does that get the PFAS level low enough to make it acceptable to have the animals processed and sold to the public? And they've done stuff like that, and they're doing stuff like that in Maine, where they're letting animals, well, hell, in Michigan. And it crossed my ass at how stupid our government is. And I always blame our governor and her damn minions of stupidness. Our PFAS specialist of Michigan, she's an idiot. They don't understand anything about farming. And a few months ago, there was some kind of a PFAS seminar thing. I was not involved. I had no idea it was on. One of my main friends was on it, and he texted me and said, "Hey, I'm on this PFAS thing. Are you on it?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Well, is there any questions you want me to ask Michigan?" I said, "Well, you're damn right I do, because it's not me, it's you, and they're not going to think twice about it." Consumer Energy and their solar farms, they have one on the west side of the state that is contaminated with PFAS, and they are pasturing sheep on it so that they don't have to mow it. They're letting the sheep eat this grass and whatnot on this PFAS contaminated solar site. And I asked the question, had my friend ask the question to the PFAS specialist of Michigan. Well, if Consumer Powers has got sheep on this contaminated land, is that safe to sell to the public? And her response was, well, yes, they're on it for a minimum amount of time. They're not going to take enough PFAS up in their systems to really harm anybody. So yes, it is safe for them to do that and sell them at the end of the year.
And they determined that how?
By pulling the number out of her ass. And she has no science. They had no science when they shut me down. Everything the state uses is pulled from their ass. They don't care about the science. I mean, my cattle had 4 parts per billion or less in them. 4 parts per billion or less. FDA said it was not an issue. USDA said it was not adulterated, but Michigan come in here and threw the book at me and basically condemned my land. And now 2 years later has pulled away my water rights with no science.
Talk about the wildlife too, Jason.
What's that?
The wildlife.
Oh, don't even get me started on that one.
No, I am.
When this all went down, the end of January of 2022, I'm going to say it was probably March or April. Our local health department called me up one day and said, "Hey, Jason, what the hell's at the farm?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, 650 of your neighbors have called wanting water samples. And we have been putting together this map of all these people wanting their water sampled, and they all encircle the farm. But yet you guys don't want the water sampled. Why? And I says, "Are you shitting me?" I says, "You don't know?" And he says, "No, what?" I says, "We're PFAS contaminated." I says, "The government served me a seizure notice on the 27th of January and went public with me at 1 o'clock on the 28th. I says, "Nothing leaves the property, this, that, and the other thing." And he goes, "No, we had no idea." I says, "You are the local health department and you have no idea?" I says, "The state of Michigan had MDARD, the state health department, jackass, the PFAS specialist, and the legal department of MDARD served me this seizure notice, and you were never informed." He goes, "No, we were never informed." I says, "I suggest you call." And he says, "Oh, you bet your ass as soon as I hang up from you, I'm calling the government to find out why we were not notified." They end up pulling 150, I think it was 150 water samples of my neighborhood. And in, I think it was August of 2022, our PFAS specialist did a Zoom to inform us of all the information. And I'll come back negative. Nothing to worry about. It's not in the water. Drink your water. Have a nice day. Opens it up to the public for questioning at the end of this thing. And a gentleman gets on and says, "Hey, I just bought 15 acres right across the street from this farm. I bought it for recreational purposes. I hunt deer, I hunt turkey, this, that, the other thing. Is it safe to eat it?" "Oh, sir, you have nothing to worry about. Those are all grazing, traveling animals. They will not spend enough time on his land to get contaminated. Go ahead and eat it all. No worries." Well, that being said, I call bullshit. And 2 years ago, I got involved with GLPAN, which, well, actually, I've been involved with them for many years. But 2 years ago, I applied for a grant with them. GLPAN is Great Lakes PFAS Action Network. I got grant money from them to do some testing of wildlife because we hunt. So I had venison in the freezer. I had wild turkey in the freezer, and we sent it off for sampling. Shocking. It comes back positive. Well, if you can't eat the beef, why the hell should you eat the wild game? Now, the information wasn't 100% what we wanted from it. So I've actually got 8 more samples of venison and turkey in the freezer again to send back out this year for more testing. But it's there. It's contaminated. And as near as I can tell, putting the information together, it's pretty darn close to the same levels that's in the beef.
Yeah, and the DNR is saying it's fine to hunt it.
Oh, not the DNR. Our PFAS specialist of Eagle says it's fine to eat.
Oh, yeah.
That was her thing. It's all fine to eat. The problem with all of these is as government officials and government agencies, they all suck ass, and they won't take any private testing as information. So, as private residents, we can turn all that in all we want, and the state says that doesn't mean shit to us because we didn't do it.
Dr. Putnam, what can we do as consumers to stop the PFAS? Because it seems like it's at the source. So do we not order chrome on our cars? I mean, is that going to stop this problem? I mean, and not buy Teflon pans? Or where are these things coming from?
They're coming from everywhere, from packaging, Yeah, I mean,
Fire retardant. I mean, are those the
yeah,
Air
that's a
Force
big one
bases
at
use?
airports.
Yeah, all the airports and Air Force bases and everything else are using it for fire retardant. But go ahead.
Yeah, they've outlawed PFAS, so companies can't put it in products anymore, but it's still out there from all the products that have already been, have it in there. So, yeah. So, yeah, airports are a big place where they're cleaning up because they all have the contamination from the AFF, AFFF fire retardant. So, you know, uh, I don't have much hope of what individual consumers can do to reduce the overall problem because it's just so pervasive. But there's certainly things that we can do to help keep us from, drinking it. You don't want to be, that's the biggest exposure to it is through water and food. So that's where you want to try and be clean if at all possible, um, if you want to stay away from it. But if you quit buying, I mean, they are phasing out the Teflon pans and, finding other materials for that, which is good. But what are you going to do with your old Teflon pan? Put it in the dump. And then what happens? It all goes into the landfill leachate, which goes out into, streams. So it's just, there's just this is an ever never ending problem. That I hope since we've quit making stuff with PFOS as much as possible, it will start decreasing. And it has. They have seen a decrease in the amount of PFAS in people's blood. That have seen it decrease over time. But yeah, I don't know. It's everywhere. So I think our best bet is to find out which ones are bad and do something about those, as because you get like Ryan mentioned, there's drugs that have fluorine in them. But, are all those drugs toxic? Probably not. So, I mean, I think it's important that we have toxicology studies and find out which are the ones that we need to avoid and try and get rid of those.
So I want to, Mike, so your question about the counties. So Michigan's counties most affected by PFAS. This is a IA search, not a real research thing here, but contamination include Kent County, Oscoda, Iosco, Alpena, Montcalm, Ottawa, Wayne. These counties host some of the largest and most persistent contamination sites with impacts ranging from drinking water, advisories to fish, and consumption warnings. So a question for you, Dr. Leslie. So maybe we don't want to know this question and answer because sometimes if you don't know, but can humans, I just recently got done with a cancer, so I know how they can test that. Can we have our blood tested and find out if we have PFAS? And even if we do, what can we do about it? Anything?
Yeah. I mean, anyone can send in a sample for PFAS testing. So yeah, you could send your blood sample in if you want to pay, $200, $300 to have it tested. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that needs to be worked on too, like having cheaper testing, find different ways to test so we can find out where it is, whether we have it, and so forth. But what was the other question you asked me?
Oh, is there anything we can do to get it out of our system? I mean, is there exercise?
Chelation or something? Yeah.
Drink lots of clean water. And I think just there's like if you have like waterproof clothing, that's not a big source. You can wear that and you're not going to that's not going to be a big contributor of PFAS to your body. But yeah, I mean, the more clean stuff you eat and drink, the better off you're going to be because it does bioaccumulate, but there's, I don't know if we want to all have blood transfusions or anything like that, but I think the main thing is just to quit eating it and drinking it.
There you go.
So can I run on
Yeah,
things here for a second? And Dr. Leslie's right. So on the other spectrum of things, I am involved with research with Michigan State University. Been involved with them for a couple of years now on the livestock end of research. And basically getting my livestock off of the dirty feed that we used to raise and putting them on clean feed. We have washed the PFAS out of them. We've got it down to very respectable levels. And when I say very respectable levels, some of the data I've seen is down below 0.00. So when you take it from that, 4 parts per billion that we originally started with in 2022 down here, and here we are finishing out 2025, and we're down at 0.00 and a number, pretty darn clean. And that was just by flushing it out with, clean feed, because we always had clean water. I got to believe for the most part, you can kind of run that same aspect across the human. I mean, I'm not a doctor by no means, but I got to believe if we can filter it out of cows with clean food and clean water, we should be able to, for the most part, be able to filter it out of a human with clean food and water, within reason. With that being said, we said there is no regulations in Michigan either on this PFAS thing and whatnot, but yet the government regulated me on it and shut me down for it. I was at a Michigan septic, I want to say septic, the waste treatment plant seminar last year in Lansing, discussing things with those guys on PFAS and whatnot. And it was very interesting to me to learn that a lot of the treatment plants in Michigan, when this whole PFAS thing came about, were tested for how much PFAS was in their wastewater streams. That our government said that the wastewater streams that had automotive industry on them were the ones they weren't concerned about, because here in Michigan, without the auto industry, this state would fail, which I call bullshit on. Sure, if we take the auto industry out of Michigan, is it going to hurt? Well, hell yes, it's going to hurt. Take any industry out of Michigan, it's going to hurt. You're going to feel the pain. But that's no reason not to treat them the same as everything else and force them to eliminate the PFAS. Because I found out the treatment plant that was supplying us with our sludge that's what the company did, was they're a big auto industry. They were doing stuff for the big three. And that waste treatment plant was not regulated on shutting down the PFAS as some of the other communities were, because the industries that we dump into PFAS in their drains were maybe making, waterproof carpet or, making some other, products. They were being told that they had to eliminate the PFAS from their systems quick, fast, in a hurry. But if that wastewater stream had auto industry in it, they were told not to worry about it. Which brings you back to government bullshit. And the regulations are not treated fairly across the marketplace. As to why I was picked on, I keep taking it back to the aspect of two things. A, we always thought it was going to be a political thing for re-election. And B, because I was a small farmer that can't fight it. Well, yeah, that's a little bit of it. Yeah, I'm a small farmer, don't have a bank account to fight it. But on the same token, I'm enough of an asshole that I will be involved with every aspect of it to fight it and complain and bitch about it from here on out, and whatnot. So PFAS it's a really screwed up chemical, because, as Leslie said, how do you eliminate it? There, this, that, the other thing. It's not only just big industry. We have a wastewater treatment plant here a few miles from the farm that all it does is residential. There's no industry in it. There's no commercial, nothing in it. It is 100% residential. I want to say it's almost 1,000 homes. their wastewater stream actually had a fairly decent sized blurb of PFAS in it. So much so that the state came down here and did a town hall meeting with them to inform them that their problem is dental floss, toothpaste, doing high pressure vacuuming of their carpets and steam cleaning carpets and pulling the PFAS chemical out of the carpets and the laundry and all that stuff is what made the PFAS blurb in their septic systems or in their sewer plant. So it wasn't even industrial. It was just homeowners. So PFAS is it's a very, very interesting chemical, and there's a lot to be learned about it.
All right. Well, this is certainly a topic that's not going to go away. And we're hoping, of course, for some good things. I have some other things I wanted to bring up, but I think we'll save that for PFAS Part 2 as we move on. Wrapping up, Leslie, anything you'd like to wrap up with? Give us some hope.
I just want to say that I attended a Great Lakes PFAS summit last week, and there was actually 3 talks that were centered on biosolids as the source of PFAS. And so there's at least 2 commercial products that are out there that people are using to immobilize the PFAS that's coming from biosolids, so that it doesn't go into the water table. So there is becoming more interest in biosolids and realization that this is a big source of PFAS.
Ryan, anything from you?
Yeah, I'll try to make this succinct, but I want to paint 2 quick pictures of just how bad this is, and then give a little bit of hope. There was a PubMed article that was put together that calculated total PFAS around the globe and how much it would cost to remediate PFAS around the world. And the number the woman came up with was something around 10 to 10,000 times more than global GDP, which is roughly like $116 trillion. So the magnitude of this is enormous. And if you think about it in terms of energy, money is energy, that's how much energy has been put into the problem. We need that same amount or more to be able to fix the problem. And so if it's just a simple physics kinetics issue, right, we need that same kind of support to be able to solve this, because it's not just PFAS. It's hydrocarbons, it's PCBs, it's heavy metals that are entering, our food and water systems every day from different industrial sources. What I'm seeing is, what gives me hope is that there are people, brilliant minds around the world right now that I've seen come out of the woodwork over the course of 4 or 5 years since this has become a topic. And people are working on solutions, and they're really digging into what is a real solution, be it for human health, and seeing PFAS being pulled out of mice in different studies using beta-glucans, soluble fiber from oats. Beta-glucans are in mushrooms. They're seeing that those compounds pull it out of mice. There's more and more studies coming out like that. Sauna is a good example. There's people are studying sauna. How does it excrete through our system? Does PFAS and microplastics come out? And they're seeing positive results. I think what is needed is the will of those that have the money to be able to make smart investments in this area. We need more and more startups, more and more researchers to fail fast so that we can learn lessons, and it cannot be just on the burden of the taxpayer. And I see little glimmers of hope. I just saw today, USDA is announcing a $700 million program for regenerative agriculture via NRCS. You're damn straight, we're going to apply this kind of project to that, and I think we have a team to be able to pull off something compelling. But 700 million is a drop in that $116 trillion bucket. And so I think that we need to see everybody at the table that can take risks and not just say, how are we going to make money? But we got to say, how do we help humanity? Mother Nature is going to be fine. Microbiology will solve this problem over time. We hominids might lose the ability to reproduce, and our grandchildren or children might not even be able to have children. Like, this is the problem. And so I think that the more that we have this conversation and bring the public's understanding, not just fear-based, but real difficult conversations about the nuance and what we can do, raise that consciousness, for me, that's what gives me hope that we can actually do something practical, and not just throw our hands up in futility. You know, Mother Nature has the secrets. We just have to listen to what she's already figured out over 4 billion years of evolution, right? We have to trust that. That has way more wisdom in it than anything that's ever been made by humans. And she knows what to do with this. We just have to tune into that and leverage science and farmer intuition. You know, when you smell good soil, you know good soil. And how can we then bring that to the lab and understand Mother Nature's secrets to help us survive, honestly?
Love it.
Jason, let's wrap up with you. But anything you'd like to share?
Well, I'd like to touch on Ryan's thing there a little bit of the USDA releasing a grant to
Regeneration.
It's a great grant to go after to do what we're doing. And then on the same token, you got to turn around and look at the EPA, who 2 weeks ago approved pesticides for agricultural use with PFAS in it. So you've got the EPA approving PFAS to be applied to the soil through pesticides, and then you got the USDA that's going to throw a grant out there for you to go after the way to clean up the soil and make things more regenerative and this, that, and the other thing. There's so much double-edged sword to this stuff. It's ridiculous. And, until you eliminate the stupidness of putting it on the soil or using it, period, how are we ever going to clean it up?
Right.
It's going to be next to impossible. And I look at the aspect of how bad and how shitty this deal is. I mean, it's bankrupt me. I mean, I don't have a pot to piss in anymore. I'm getting ready to get myself a 9-to-5 job now because I can't make this go round anymore. And when that happens, how much is my ability to be able to work with guys like Ryan to try and clean this up? It becomes really tough moving forward with all this stuff and being in the position I'm in that, there's a good chance that we're going to end up losing this farm, just the taxes, because I got nothing coming in anymore. As I said, we did file a lawsuit and, we were supposed to get income from that. And we figured that was going to help us move forward with research and paying taxes and taking care of life. And then that company files bankrupt and you don't get any settlement out of it. And now you look at the aspect of getting a 9-to-5 job. Well, you start doing that and that eliminates my ability to do anything with the soil and take care of this farm and help move forward with stuff too. So, it frustrates me to no end, especially knowing that we've got some pretty impressive stuff that we've done the last 2 years, that it might all just fall apart because we can't afford to hang on to the place. I mean, my taxes go up 5% every year for a piece of property that the government labeled that we can't grow anything on for human consumption or animal consumption. Now, 2 years later, to find out that even if we wanted to sell off 10 acres to put money in the bank to survive, who the hell's going to buy a piece of property that you can't even put a well on?
Yeah.
And the animals are contaminated. So who wants to buy it for recreational purposes, for hunting and all that stuff? The future here looks very slim, and it's very frustrating. Because I'm really hopeful for this research that Ryan and Leslie and stuff are working on. But on the same token, the future is bleak for us, very bleak, and it sucks because the government caused the whole problem. I don't care what anybody says; they're 100% behind it. They gave these companies the permits to make the chemicals they make. They gave the companies the permits to dump the chemicals down the drain, and then they turn around and blame the farmer.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember what article it was, that when Eagle was interviewed about my situation, their response was, well, he shouldn't have taken the biosolids, then he wouldn't be in a spot. Well, that's bullshit. That's that. No, you guys should have never gave the permits to dump it down the drain. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
We appreciate you sharing your story and moving the needle.
And we want to appreciate everybody today. But I know Cody had to leave early, but this obviously is not the end of this conversation in any way, shape, or form. We'll do some follow-ups to this and let everybody know what's going on, but we appreciate the time that all of you have been able to. This is going a little over our normal iHemp hour. We're going to call it an hour and a half, but but we appreciate it very much that you guys had the time and were able to shed light on this, because this is it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem for sure. And we hope that we're going to be able to find some solutions, and you have given us some glimmer of hope here. I appreciate it. So thank you.
Keep up the good fight.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this.
Yeah, much appreciated, everybody.